Hey guys, and welcome to Wakefield to Knottingley episode number 29. This is the first episode for about 5 months, and I wanted to give you guys a bit of an update as to where we are. There's not been much seen in public for a while, but rest assured there has been stuff going on in the background, although to be honest less than normal. But starting off here at Knottingley, there's not much has changed since we stuck the drive in episode 28, but it's when we come out of Knottingley we turn right towards Ferrybridge. That's where the work's been taking place. So it's been a bit of a quiet period for the route. We've not really had much going on. I've been moving house and stuff. I've been moving down to Cudduff in Barnsley, so I've been busy sort of dealing with all that crap that goes along with moving house and everything. So I've just not had the time, nor motivation, to be honest, to actually do videos. Although in that period I've actually been working quite a bit on the route, so we've still got a fair bit done. On the plus side, there are now 4 of us working on the route, which is great, and Tom's joined in to help get the section into Leeds done. From sort of Woodland area up into Leeds, so that's really coming along quite nicely. And we've also got Matt Cox now on the Drax branch, as well as Carl, who's obviously been involved since the beginning. So we've got a lot of stuff going on at the minute, and the area that I've been focusing on is the area from Knottingley to Ferrybridge, and then we're going north now to Milford as well. So Milford will be the northern sort of end to this route in phase 1, so that you can bring trains across. And obviously eventually when we go across the Pennines you'll be able to take it trains to Milford and stuff as well. That's the general idea anyway. Just to give it a bit more of a sort of general sort of northern sort of portal, and also inferior connection to Harrogate Loop as well. So it just gives it that area, so it makes more sense than just ending it suddenly at Ferrybridge North Junction. It's only like 4 miles extra to Milford, so it's really not fair. So yeah, this is the section that I've been working on, which is around Ferrybridge. This has been a really challenging bit. As we get down here, it's all on embankments and different levels and stuff, and it was about pain in the backside to try and get together, but quite happy with how it turned out. Got the little Ferrybridge box there. That's Ferrybridge North Junction that we're coming to here. So obviously you got this line that we've just seen there going around towards Knottingley. The middle lines carry on down towards Morthorpe and eventually Swinton towards Sheffield. And the one on the right, as we know, goes up onto the Wakefield to Knottingley line. And in map form, you can sort of see how that works out. So as I say, we're going up to Milford with the route now. Scenery is currently complete to Burton Salmon, pretty much. So we're getting quite well up there. Not long until we'll get up to Milford, probably within a month or 2, I would imagine, at the current rate. And then we've got the section back through Castleford, and then we've got scenery coming up to about here at Whitwood. So there's not that much to do. There's a gap there, and then there's a gap up to Pontefract. Everything else you can see is more or less complete. Tom's going cracking, on with it into Leeds itself. So we're getting pretty well on with it now. I want to really try and get this something out this year if I can. Although we're not rushing it and make no commitment to that. I really would like to try and get something out. So as I say, we got the junction here at Ferrybridge North. Plenty of housing and stuff going on there. Try not to go too far over the top with the detail away from the track, because the main problem we've got is that it's such an intense tile. There's a lot going on down here, and it's on an embankment. You got to try and keep some of the detail, such as gardens and stuff next to the track, highly detailed. But then as you get away from the track, especially sort of using this tree line as a breaker, that's the idea I've gone with, is that tree line breaks your visual idea of what's going on behind it. You can't see it from the cab, so everything behind that tree line is just literally placed. So it's placed houses, a few placed roads. It's nothing flamboyant. Beyond that, there'll probably be some housing blocks and stuff like that. So it's a case of just trying to keep the detail minimum away from the trackside, but also at the same time create little scenes near the track, such as this little warehousing area, so that when you've got a train coming over there, it looks nice. Quite a lot of foliage work took place here to try and give it that feel of an area that's diverse. It's not just tree line, tree line, tree line, tree line, and all the same sort of height. The idea was to try and make it sort of quite in depth, quite varied. Unfortunately, I did have to go for 2D Leylandite trees, or whatever they're called, because unfortunately in TS there's just no decent 3D ones. I think the poplar trees, actually, and what the hell I just said. But we wanted to make sure I got them in there, because there is a line of them there, and I ain't got any 3D ones that look half decent, so we've gone with 2D there. But yeah, this is the junction then for Ferrybridge Power Station. So we haven't really done the lines into Ferrybridge yet. The first part of them's in, but not fully in terms of scenery. Again, over here it's just pretty basic. There's not much going on, because I don't want to kill frame rate too much. I mean, frame rate at the moment with Streamlabs running is still 60 odd and 50 odd in that direction. With a train, it goes down to about 35 to 40 for me, with more than one train. And that for me is perfectly acceptable. It's what I aim for. For others it may be a bit low, but you know, for me it's perfectly acceptable. And with Streamlabs running as well, more than happy with it. Obviously as you come into this tile there's a bit of stutter because there's just so much going on in it. It's a big area that you're trying to load in, but it's kind of the same as if you're going into some towns and stuff in other routes. So yeah, this is a junction. This little crossing here, that's used by Freightliner crews. There's a little Freightliner office there. Freightliner have an office there, and they change crews and stuff here at the junction for Ferrybridge Power Station. Obviously it doesn't see as much use in terms of crew changes and stuff these days because the power station itself is obviously shut, so that's something that you don't see these days. So this is where it got really sort of difficult with the route building sort of thing because of how many levels it's on. The main line stays up on this level. The line into Ferrybridge Power Station on the left goes down at a gradual gradient. The line out, for empty trains obviously coming out of the power station, is quite steep coming out because it comes away from the loader, so that's on two different levels. Then you've got the wagon repair depot where the biomass wagons get repaired. That's on this right hand side, and that goes down at a different level. It goes down roughly at the same level as the one in the middle, although it's a slightly shallower gradient. So trying to get all this in was a bit of a nightmare, I'll be honest, and it took a good couple of weeks to actually pull it off. But needless to say, pretty happy with how it ended up looking. Been trying to get all the detail done in terms of trackside network cabinets and stuff, you know, line side cabinets and everything. All the signalling's done. And again, the key for me here was trying to get the foliage sort of realistic looking. You've got your saplings and stuff, your small trees and bushes that you see on these sorts of bits of line, you know, and then you've got the sort of fully grown stuff out here because there's never been any clearance really on the side of the tracks. And then on this side you've got your birch trees down the side there. But yeah, the idea is trying to keep it so it's saplings where they have been at some point cleared in the past, and away from the track. It's obviously fully adult trees because they're not being cleared. So obviously we've been to power station, you've got all sorts of power lines going on. Those ones I probably could try to do with connecting to the substations if possible. Much like I did here, where the wires do go into the substation. They don't go in accurately because you can't really do it very accurately, but from the cab certainly it looks like they do, and that's the key. There's all sorts of substations because you've got the original, I think that's the original Ferrybridge Power Station over there. And then you've obviously got down here where we may get a custom depot, I'm not sure yet. We probably will at some point in the future because we need it over there on the right. You've got the former National Power Depot here at Ferrybridge. So this is where the 59s used to be based that used to do the, you know, coal trains to Drax and stuff from Gascoigne Wood and whatnot. This is where the 59s used to be based. I always remember when I was a kid going along the A1 over there and you see the famous blue 59s sat on here. Later years it was used to store the 56s after they've been withdrawn from EWS in 2004. They came out in about 2011, I want to say. 2012 maybe. And then since then it's been used for biomass wagon repairs, I believe. And it's still in use today, so at least it's still in some use. So yeah, you got, as I said, you got the line on the far right. That is the line into Ferrybridge Power Station. And this is very much work in progress. It's literally just the banking. You can sort of see how it gets layered up from here. So the layering up that I do is I put the embankments in first, then I put the grass on, and then I also put the embankment bushes on. And then the final thing that I add in is the sort of bushes, trees. The fencing goes in first before any of that as well. So you get the loft embankment, and then I do the fencing. Then I add the foliage. So these are the lines out of Ferrybridge Power Station. This is where the loaders and stuff will eventually be, because we're going to do it as it was when it was still open with the loaders to give it so much more scenario potential. You've got two lines out here going to one, and then they climb out quite gradually. Although it does steepen, I think it's about over 100 anyway. It's steeper than 100 around this section, and it climbs quite steep out of the power station. And as I said, up here you got the lines then on towards Milford. So these carry on towards Milford Junction itself, and you can clearly see the different levels once again. And we're getting ready to cross at this point the River Aire down here at Brotherton. So this was a kit bash built bridge. I've not got a custom asset for this because I'm not going to need one. It's not 100% accurate, but it's close enough. This is where you cross the river at Brotherton. And it gives you that iconic view. This is very much work in progress, by the way. They're not got like trackside detail and stuff in, but it gives you that iconic view of Ferry Bridge itself. Again, with detail. So what I've tried to do is obviously keep it high detail in here. It's not finished, this bit. But once we get to this tree line here, because you can't see from the cab beyond that tree line, everything past it will be literally the most basic it possibly can be, just to keep that frame rate high. Because look, it's 42 now. That's borderline unplayable in terms of once you get a load of AI in. So that's what we'll be careful of. That's bordering on the same sort of levels as Toten in the Midland mainline route. So that's key to try and keep that low. That way obviously it's 50 odd going towards 60, and it'll keep rising as we go in this direction because there's not as much detail. So that's obviously the key thing is that this is a very intense tile. You can see all the detail that's in there, especially once you get up to this bit, and then obviously you've still got this loaded in up here. You can sort of see why it's going to be a bit of a pull on the old resources. But there's little that you can do otherwise with that. We want to keep the route looking consistently good throughout, and I'm always willing to take a bit of a performance hit if that means that the route can stay looking good at the same time. So we're going to cross the river and we're going to go down here and we're going to do a little bit of work now we've done this update on what's going on. I haven't got Tom's work into the route yet myself, so I can't actually show you that, but rest assured he's doing a decent job, as I'm sure you'd expect anyway. But this is a little access road that comes in here, and then you're going to Brotherton Cutting. Now what I've tried to simulate in here with the foliage is different to what I've been trying to do further back, and that is the around 2015, 16, I can't remember what year it was, they did cut this back completely in here to just embankment sides, but it resprouted very quickly and it was all saplings down here very soon after. They didn't cut past the railway boundary because why would they? So past the railway boundary it's all adult trees, fully grown trees as it is in real life. But next to the track you got saplings everywhere because they're starting to sprout back through, and indeed these days it's quite overgrown again. We're simulating it sort of 2017, 18 as it was just starting to sprout back through again. So that's how that's looking. You got the entrance to Brotherton Tunnel, which you can go through. Oh, in that case, over, and then you come back out and you go under what is the old A1, so the Great North Road, which is over here. But again, same sort of theory. They cut some of this back as well, although they didn't do quite the same job as they did other side of the tunnel. Again, when you go up towards the top of the banking, it's adult trees. They didn't cut down right up the top. They only cut down the stuff that was low down. So again, that's the idea with the foliage, is to try and keep it consistent. And this is about as basic as we get at the moment. This is as far as the scenery has progressed. We've not got any further than this so far. So we're going to do a pretty short episode. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this foliage sort of layering that I do. You got the little kit bashed footbridge down here at Brotherton again. We are making a concerted effort to keep custom assets to a very minimum. Callum's workload over the last couple of years has increased a hell of a lot. And it's not fair to keep bundling assets on top of him. So we're only really going to be getting the stations, and anything we simply can't manage without done as custom assets. It's a free route, so that's kind of why. Obviously if it was payware then you get more of them done, but we're not in a position where we want to or can afford to do that, so quite simple. So what I'm going to do here is, it helps if I tell you what I'm going to do before I do it. I'm going to fill these bankings with grass, and then we'll put embankment bushes on top of that, and then we'll start layering some other foliage onto it. We've not painted any terrain yet. That'll come probably last. It depends on, I sort of vary how I do it, to be honest. I do generally seem to do it last though. In terms of Google overlay, you can sort of see along here it's pretty overgrown, but the key is next to the track inside this fencing it's mostly just grass and sort of embankment bushes. So that's going to be the key here, is just trying to keep it sensible, and again following the same sort of idea and keeping it consistent with what's going on up here, is that they did cut it back about 5 years ago. So that's what we're going to be doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the grass in next to the track as we've done before. This will be the Southampton to Bournemouth grass. Turn it onto local so that the grass doesn't just hold into the ground with the snap to terrain tool. Onto local, so it's only modifying this asset, and also you can move it around and everything and rotate it around the asset, not the global function. I've explained all this thousands of times before. Track here is on a 1 in 5, 1 6 gradient, so we don't need to rotate it, or we know it's not going to suddenly start floating or anything like that. We can just literally slap this down quite quickly. It's just a case of copying and pasting, and quite simply going along, lifting it if I need to, dropping it if I need to, and just drop this in. This is the first layer I would call of foliage, and I go for a few layers as we go along, because to me the foliage is the key part of the route. That is the most important thing, because it's the thing you see the most. Outside of signalling and, you know, trap work, the most important thing to me is foliage, because it's what sets a route apart, in my opinion. If it's all samey, it all looks the same, it's not got the same sort of trees, you know, if it's all the same sort of tree sizes, heights, just basically chucked in, to me that signals a rushed route, and that's not what I like. So I always try and keep it as varied as I possibly can. It means that I use a lot of assets, but again, as I said, I'm always willing to take a bit of performance hit if it means it looks a bit better, so long as it's not unplayable like 4 FPS or something daft at the end of the day. And then I also, you'll notice with my routes, once you get outside of cab range, for the most part, it then goes very basic. You know, you won't see a lot of massive detail if you're not going to see it from the cab or from a wide open vantage point. You know, for screenshot potential, then I really don't do much there, because at the end of the day, there's absolutely no point in taking performance away when you don't need to. I'm, as I say, I don't mind taking the performance away if I think I need to, i.e. for foliage and stuff, but I'm a big believer in trying to keep it limited if you can't see it from the cab or from general sort of play. So we've got the base sort of grass down the sides here. That's chucked in now. There's nothing else we need to do there. We can throw some embankment bushes like such as these in if we want to, and I may well do at some point, but right now I'm not concerned about that. What I'm concerned with now is getting the grass onto these embankments at the side. That's the key thing for us to focus on next, is getting the grass embankments filled with grass, because at the moment they look very bare. They really don't, you know, you're driving along and you just see that, it looks crap, to be honest. So the idea is you try and cover it with grass. Now when you go in here, there's all sorts of different grasses. You can't really cover them with these because it just doesn't work. You try and cover it with that, and you'll notice in that instance it looks okay. But where the embankment moves or it changes direction, then yeah, that's not going to work, because you'll end up with long bits of it floating and stuff like that. So you know, instead of having half of this done with that grass and half of it done with another, the simple way I do it is I just do it all with this grass /3. It's the same colour, broadly speaking, as the stuff we've just placed. Obviously we can't just drop that on the embankment because, well, for starters it's about 10 times too big. So how do we get around that problem? Quite simple. Make sure that we're on local for starters, which we always are, as I say, so we can rotate freely and everything. And then all we need to do is double click the grass asset. This will open this window here. And now on the right hand side, unfortunately it will set a detail set density 2, we'll ignore that for now. On the right hand side there, that panel will open when you click it. What we're going to do is control the size of this block of grass. We're going to make it smaller. And to do that, we're using the scale tool, but we're manually doing it. We're not using this scale tool. We're using the manual one on the right hand side flight window. So again, double click it. Then what we're going to do is going to put this down to 20% of its normal size. Only in length and width. We're not going to change the height of it. So what we do is we press 0.2 in there for 20%. So you can see that's made it a lot narrower. In theory, you probably could lob that on there now. And I may well do, to be honest, because it's straight at this point. So it looks alright. Just needs rotating. So we've got 20% width grass, basically. Now, it'll look a little bit weird when there's no other foliage on it. And this is where I always say that it helps as a route builder to know what your destination is before you get there. Because at this point, I don't particularly like how this is going at the moment. It doesn't look anything. It just looks a bit meh. There's nothing going on. But I know how I want this to look, and I know how it will look once I've done everything I'm going to do to it. So I can look past the fact that at the moment it looks pretty crap. Again, I can just carry on lobbing these in at the moment because it's a nice level embankment. It's not going up and down. It's not bulging sideways or anything. Changing, width, basically. We can just drop these in. Now, these embankments that are placed are the Liverpool to Manchester grass embankments. And to merge those into the hillside behind, because obviously it's not a two-sided embankment, it's a one-sided one, hidden underground, I have placed a second one behind it. So they're back to back. Now, there will probably be a little slight fold in it somewhere where you can see where it joins, although it's very difficult, it seems to see. That allows me to control the width of the banking, it allows me to control the height of the banking, and it's the easiest and best way, in my opinion, of doing it. You can use the terrain blocks, which are... where are they? The banking assets, which is such as this one. But to me, it doesn't look right. It's, for starters, it's got dirt down the side, and most embankments don't have dirt down the side. Some do, but most don't. You can obviously use the one that's flipped the other way, but then you've got dirt on top. Well, I don't want dirt on top. And again, that's all one height and everything. It's very flat on top, which is the same as mine, but it's all one height and it's always going to be the same look. With a lofted one, I can create the illusion that the embankment is changing in height. It goes up and down. So you see on the right hand side there, it goes up and down, as I've seen in the cab video, basically. To try and give it that bit of depth, to give it that bit of unique location. It doesn't feel like you're driving through the same place 1,000 times. Oh, I'm in a cutting sort of thing. It's, oh, I'm in Brotherton cutting. That's what I'm trying. That's the feeling that I'm trying to go for by doing this. And it's always been the way with my route buildings. It's what I've tried to do. Now again, I'm not 100% happy with how it's looking at the minute. Just going to check it. Nothing's floating. It's not. But once we've got all the foliage in, I will be happy with how it's looking. I'm sure of it because I'm pretty certain what I'm doing. Now this bit here, where it goes higher, is a totally different sort of ball game because it's not going up there. It's bulging. It's coming out a bit wider. It's also a lot steeper. We can just copy and paste this grass block up there. It won't work. You know, I can try and place it up there, and it just won't work. For starters, you've got bits floating up here. And now we've also got bits floating down here. And then at this end, again, we've got bits floating everywhere. So how do we overcome this problem? Quite simple. Get the ones that we've already placed. Now, we know we already made it 20% wide. You know, 20% of its normal width. But we still kept it at the same length. The grass block is just as long as it was at the start. Now, what we can do with this grass block is we could make it 20% as long as it was by doing the 0.2 thing again. That makes it into a tiny, tiny grass block. And what we can do then is just sink that in. Simple as that. Just sink it into the ground. Lob it in there. Now, it'll all repeat a little bit. You'll see it sort of repeats. And that's where the layering of foliage comes in. It's trying to keep it sort of sensible, trying to layer it up a bit. And this will take a little bit more rotating. It'll take a little bit of time to do this. And that's why you don't rush your foliage, because if you do, then you'll end up with it floating everywhere. And it's impossible to have it so it doesn't float anywhere. It's about when it does float, trying to hide it and trying to get away with it. So you can see around here, I'm going to have to do something with that at some point, but I can't bother doing it in this video. But it's about trying to get rid, sort of hide some of these bits where it's a more stretched textures and stuff, where the bankings, how they work. If you're driving spring, obviously it won't be very well hidden, but most people don't drive in spring because TS looks terrible in spring. But it's about trying to hide the imperfections if there is any, and 9 times out of 10 there will be. And it's about trying to hide sort of the low texture looking embankment. You know, the embankment does its job. It makes it so that you can do a nice tight embankment cutting. So the reason we do that, I mean, obviously, for those that don't route code, why didn't I just make the terrain go up to the track? Surely that would be the sensible way of doing it. Well, unfortunately, the train simulated terrain well, it is a mess. Terrain mesh doesn't allow you to do steep bankings next to the track that are short and sharp. It'll only let you do within its limits. So that's fine. That's how we want it. We want it to be like a hill, and this is all covered in trees. So we want that to be like that. It's fine for that. But we needed something a bit shorter and sharper next to the track, and that's why we've used lofted embankments to create that effect. Anyway, we now got, as I said, our grass onto that banking. And as I say, it repeats and stuff. It doesn't look amazing at the moment. Especially considering we've only got one side done. Because we've only got one side done, obviously it's hard to imagine how it's going to look when it's done. But the next thing we can do is we can add weeds and stuff to it, you know, because no banking really, not many, especially where there's trees. Not many bankings are just grass. You do find them, and certainly in Steam days you found them a lot because you'd have short grass bankings and stuff. And I point you to the guys that are doing the Golden Age routes for that. You'd see very well kept embankments because they used to keep them cut because they'd always burn down if they didn't. Because the steam, well, obviously we don't have steam operating generally these days, so they don't generally keep stuff in check, which is why whenever a steam tower runs, it sets everything on fire and causes absolute chaos. So what we can do to vary this banking out is put some of these grass embankments in. So all I'm going to do is, all routes have different styles of grass embankments. Southampton to Bournemouth, I could have used their grass embankments. And where are they? In here. I could have used these embankments. But I'm going to use the grass embankments because I just prefer the colour of them. I think the Southampton to the Bournemouth ones have got that weird brown look to them. It just doesn't look quite right. All I'm doing with this is getting the thin one and I'm rotating it and I'm just going to drop it along. Now I'm not just going to repeat this all the way along because again it comes to the point of well, it all end up looking the same and I don't want it all to look the same, so what's the point in that? It's about dropping it in every so often and trying to recreate what I see in the CAD video essentially. It's not rocket science, it's just trying to keep it in tune with how it is in real life. Now I'm just trying to get the CAD video on and I've ended up with a bloody advert on at the same time while we're at it.
Your honey appointment. I'm here to help you add honey to your browser.
She's helping me add honey to the browser. Don't want any honey on my browser. So we're trying to just go onto the CAD view, which I can't show you obviously because of copyright and blah blah blah. In this banking, in this cutting, it's essentially the same. Beyond that fence will be fully adult grown trees. On the inside of this fence will be just basically embankment grass and some saplings. Now my video is from when they'd literally just cut it, so there's actually still a couple of tree stumps and stuff on the inside of the fence. Now I'm going to be doing it about 4 years after that, so I've got to sort of understand as it was past this bridge, it's a little bit more overgrown. Now on this section I'm just trying to place some of these small ones, but as you can see it's a little bit too on the big side. So I just need to scale this down, put the padlock on so it's all scaled in uniform. And with this one we can just scale it down nicely. And it'll then blob on there perfectly. Again, another one there. And we're going to rotate it. Now next to the track it is pretty much just grass. So this bit at the bottom is pretty much just grass. Now you see there's another bit there that's a bit sort of more uncovered. I can drop in, again, one of these smaller sections of embankment grass. Just to give it a bit more of a diverse feel. So that it breaks it up a bit. And then what we can do is start adding some small trees and bushes. And that's quite a simple process. We just go along essentially and drop in some Southampton to Bournemouth bush lines. We're not going to go for anything sort of exotic here because there's nothing really to place. It's not like some areas where you're placing individual trees where there are individual trees. It's a case of the saplings here and that's about it. So we can place a line of these, and actually what I will do is, because it's literally blocked off behind the fence by foliage, we can place full lines of these on the edge of the fence line. And again, just vary them in height slightly so that they don't all look the same, even though you won't really notice once the whole scene is there. And you can rotate them to change how they look as well. So I can look at that now and see how it looks. I'm getting happy with how it's looking in general. What I can do is put also a little tree in here next to the bridge, just to sort of mask that corner off there a little bit when I can actually select the damn thing. That'll do. And then it's a case of actually putting in some of these sapling lines, because we've got the coppices growing where they've cut the trees back. When they've cut them back, they grow quite quickly back because they don't do a full job of getting rid of them. And nature being nature, because there's lines of adult trees behind here, lo and behold, when they drop the seeds and everything, it makes them grow where they used to be before. So you get these saplings that are growing quite quickly and rapidly within, usually almost in the same in the next season, basically. The next spring, they'll suddenly start sprouting through pretty quickly. And that's what we're trying to simulate here, is just that sort of starting of growth coming through. Now I'm placing beech lines at the minute because I think they look the nicest sort of look with them, the colour. And I'm just going down this section, placing those at odd locations where there's a bit much grass or whatever, and essentially just trying to vary it up as much as I possibly can. And again, this does all take time, and you've got to be patient when you're doing it to try and make sure that you don't. You got to make sure you don't go too overboard. At the same time, you got to make sure you don't rush it. That is the key, is rushing. That's when you can end up making stuff look really crap, and it's just, you know, not worth bothering with by the time you're done. Now the problem with the Southampton to Bournemouth foliage, whilst it is good, is that it doesn't have any proper adult tree lines. You know, these aren't adult tree lines. You can't use them for tree lines. People do, but you can't. They're not adult trees. They're saplings. Why DTG decided with this route not to bother making tree lines is beyond me. I don't know. Only DTG can attest to why there's no actual adult tree lines in that pack, but there isn't. And at the end of the day, when you've got more requirements ticked, you can sort of get around it by putting in, as you see here, the North London line tree lines. Now I use the North London line ones because they've got a nice sort of green appeal to them. They look good. So it's tree line group 3 and group 4 are the two that I generally use, and I sort of vary them and I swapping them around. Now I'm not too fussed about this back line sort of emerging and looking quite similar, because it's pretty much impossible to make them all look completely different. I can swap it around and use 4, then 3, then rotate and fill in the gaps with other trees, which is what I'll be doing. The idea is that these are really large trees though, so we need to make sure that we're actually making them nice and big. Just check that I'm starting to get the desired effect. I am, although it's at the moment it's very messy because it's not fully infilled. You've got gaps in these tree lines, and in reality there are no gaps. It's a full-on forest up there, and it's a case of just trying to make sure that we give an authentic sort of feel. Now these trees should be a little bit close to this fence line. They're literally right by it because they overlap. They actually sort of overhang the fencing. And that's the key to try and do here, is what I'm doing now. So it overhangs the fencing. And again, you've got these big gaps. If I just left it with that there, then it looks pretty crap. Let's be honest about that. We'll get one more line on the end of here. Back behind the fence. And then what we can do is we can go along and place individual trees to fill the gaps in. So because I've got, I think it's North Somerset line that I've got installed, I can just pick out some of the better 3D trees that are on their own and just drop them in where I see these gaps in the lines, because the tree lines are always a bit meh in terms of the actual depth and everything. They don't fill the gaps. There's huge gaps there, and you'll see when I put the 2D trees down behind there, you just see a 2D tree through that gap, and that'd look crap. So we're trying to avoid doing that, and we're avoiding doing that by putting in extra trees and varying out which ones we're doing, varying the sizes, because again that'll break up how the whole thing will look eventually. So we've got a nice big tree there, and as we're coming along you're sort of going to see that. Oh, that's a bit too big at the minute. And the idea will be that it'll look varied. So again, we've got the elm tree in there, and already you can see we're starting to fill that gap, and we need something in there, and I'm going to put a medium elm tree in there. Fill it in there. So now we're getting a nice wall of trees, because it is what it is there. It is a wall of trees. There is no gap in it. Get a horseradish tree. I think it is a horseradish? A horse chestnut. Horseradish, for Christ's sake. Horse summer, I know that. I think it's a chestnut. Why did I just say chestnut? Again, another big gap. So we can fill this one here. Get a sycamore tree. Sycamore that in. Moment of silence there for how shit that one. And I've sworn as well. Points knocked off for that. So because we've gone along a little bit now, I'm not afraid to reuse some of these. So where's that beech tree that we placed? There it is. So I can reuse this now because we've got a few trees along. I don't want to go just placing beech tree, because it all looks the same. You just keep placing the same sort. And you can also rotate them. So we've got 2 elm trees in here somewhere. Where did the other one go? There it is. So you see I've got them sort of, oh, we'll have in a minute, rotated differently. So that's facing the opposite way to the one that's up there. Now you can really not tell that's the same tree. Because DTG's trees are all similar, it does sort of have the same effect. And we can get around that by trying to vary the height a little bit, and trying to also vary the placement a little bit. See, what I've done is I've pulled some of them up there to the same sort of height. But you can sort of see we've got one overhanging here, which we'll see if we have to move that around. I'll try and rotate it around a little bit. There we go. So it doesn't overhang quite as much. Drop this conker tree in. Another beech tree. And again, this is the time consuming bit. Your foliage is where most of my time will get spent. I could have filled this cutting in 5 minutes if I wanted to with foliage, and I could have been flying off down there now. But it's not my style, it's not how I build, so that's why I'm not flying off down there now. And again, that's why my roots take so long, and why I've really never released much. We'll get there eventually, I'm not in any rush. It's not a vase. We haven't put an alder tree in, so let's put an alder tree in here. Now, what this will be, when we turn a look at it in a minute, is it'll be very green. But it is green in real life. So that's how it's going to be. I'm not going to like go doing anything flamboyant and try and put, you know, do a tom and put 7 pinks down this side of this track, or a gorse bus or something daft. And, you know, I'm not going to do that because it's not there in real life at the end of the day. In real life, it's just green. There's just weeds and grass. That's all there is. There's nothing crazy. If there was rose bay down there, I'll put rose bay down there, but I don't put rose bay where there's not rose bay. Pretty simple logic, really. And it's a case of just trying to make sure we keep it as authentic as we can. We're always going to be limited by what you can do in TS. That's just how it is. You can only do what you can do. But you can try and use the tools a bit better to try and make it so that it's a nice experience. Now it's gradually got the lining that I want there. It's a little bit samey, more than I like, but it's got the feeling that I want. You've got the variance with these down here, so it doesn't all look the same. It's still hard to judge it fully because we've got this embankment on the right that hasn't been filled in fully yet, which is obviously the main focus for when I've carried on after this video. I'm not going to get all that done in this video, quite simply, I don't think, unless I try and lob the foliage in quickly. No, I'm not going to rush it, as I say. We'll leave it here, I think. But that is essentially how I would layer up the foliage on that banking. What I would probably do then, and again, is that this will be nothing here, essentially. This is just trees. When we do put this road in, it'll literally just be the road. And then over here, I won't be placing those cars. I won't be placing any fences, because what bloody fence are you going to see from down here? You're not going to see it fencing. Bloke scrap me out up there. To be honest, I could just place trees there and nobody would really know. But I probably will place these buildings, just the buildings alone, and then we'll have a line of houses, or maybe a housing block, although it's not really the sort of houses that we see in a housing block. I'm very, as much as I'm against samey foliage, I'm against samey root building when it comes to housing blocks. Just hate seeing them all the time. I hate myself for where I've placed some of them myself. You know, I understand obviously got to keep the frame rate low, which is keep the frame rate high, which is why sometimes you've got to use them a bit more than others. But what I would do now I've done this line of 3Ds is I'm not going to do another line of 3Ds behind there, because that'll really start harming FPS. I've already harmed the FPS by putting 500 pieces of foliage in the cutting, or 200 or whatever it is, about 200 I think, in there. So what we can do then is we can layer up with tree lines behind, which is 2D trees, and just drop them in. And behind them we'll put woodland behind them. And all this serves to do is just create a green blanket, essentially. Because it is literally just trees here. It's a small woodland. And it's all a case of keeping that hidden away. And it's a case of also making sure that the 2Ds aren't too noticeable from the cab, which is why we filled those gaps in. Let's just say, for instance, I remove the trees where the gaps, the ones that I placed in as extras to fill the gaps. The difference there now, you can suddenly see straight through to the 2Ds. Put them back in, and they do exactly what they were designed to do, which is break away. So you only see the tips of the 2Ds. And I'm not concerned about seeing the tips of the 2Ds. Because again, in the cab, you aren't going to be worried about that. Now, on top of this banking, we can place woodland. And we're doing that just to cover off this area. Now, that's going to be too big to place there. Although we can place it there, look. So that's saved essentially placing an extra forest. Because we can place that one, which is a nice big block to place. And we can place some more up here. Always try and place the biggest blocks that you can to fill in the gaps, because at the end of the day, although you're saving on something that's really not that resource intensive, you're still saving. And wherever you can make of a save, saving on assets, then that's not affecting the visual appearance of the route, then go for it. The only time I've got a caveat to that is if I can improve that, if the cost of the performance impact is outweighed by the looks, i.e. the looks are more important than the FPS in some circumstances. So I can see those 2Ds above there, but there's going to be a line of foliage here, so you won't see them anyway. After that, you won't see them from the cab, and you won't even see them from passenger view really, because it gives you that feeling that that's a nice deep forest, which is what we're going for through there. Obviously that all requires finishing off, but you get the idea. And then what I would do is I would do the foliage on this side, I would do the distant scenery, I would do any trackside scenery, although there isn't really any. There's a couple of signals that I still need to place up here for some reason. And there might be a junction box or something, although it doesn't seem like there's much. There is one to go on the left here, one junction box. But there's not really that much in this cutting, and that's why the foliage is kind of the key. So yeah, that's how I would do foliage in a cutting. And eventually end up with something, more like this, or like we've just seen in that one there. And it's a case of trying to create something that varies, so you don't go through the same cutting every time you go through a cutting or on an embankment. That's the key. Hope you've enjoyed watching video number 29 in this series, guys. We're nearly at episode 30 now. Might feature something else, maybe Leeds area possibly, I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers very much for watching, guys. Thanks as always. See you later. Bye.